I'm here with Lachlan Giles discussing his preparation for ADCC 2019. In the last video, we discussed how Lachy approached his 8-week-long ADCC competition preparation macrocycle. Now we're going to jump right back into the discussion and look at Lachy's goals for the skill development macrocycle, before zooming in further and comparing what Lachy was doing on a daily basis and how it changed as he switched from skill development to competition preparation. So Lachy, we just talked about the ADCC camp, but in the skill development period of that, your focus was purely on wrestling and leg locks. Is that really what you were just working on?
Predominantly, yeah. So those are the key areas. I was trying to do some private lessons with our wrestling instructor as well, which would be a training slash, it's not just a technical lesson. It's usually I'm training with them and trying to get feedback kind of through that, and technical advice and drills as well through that. Yeah, and leg locks as well. So most of my specific training would be from either some part of the entry or some part of the leg entanglement to try to get the finish.
Was there anything else that you were doing? Were you like filming your sessions and looking at what was happening during that skill development phase that allowed you to develop your skill more quickly?
For my leg locks, I was filming my leg lock instructional. So that I actually think that's a huge factor in that improvement I had in the last few months in the lead up to ADCC. It usually takes me a few months to film and release to film a product, and then it takes a few months after that for it to be edited and released. But so during that, I'll be filming because I'm trying to get footage to see if what I think I do is actually what I do, and then understand what I do better. So I'll be filming the roles I had and a lot of the 50-50 exchanges, and usually by doing that, I actually notice some little details like, oh, okay, they actually turned that. You get to see how people are responding and how you counter it. And I think once you understand that, because a lot of these things might be subconscious, but then once you actually understand it, you can then focus on that and improve upon it further. And I think that was actually a huge factor for improving my leg locks in the lead up to ADCC was studying my own footage. And then for wrestling, I didn't do as much self-footage, mostly because, I don't know, I actually wish I had someone there to film all of my roles, but it's usually everyone's there to train. I don't have someone there to stand around and do that for me, but I'd like to. So usually with wrestling, I try to be very aware of what I'm doing and what I perceive the issue with a technique that's not working, or a situation that I'm having trouble with, and I will often and I try to emulate particular high level wrestlers when I'm training. For example, a wrestler who I think has one of the best, most transferable wrestling styles to jiu-jitsu is Hassan Yazdani, who's an Iranian wrestler, and just about everything he does is based off the underhook. And I wanted that to be my my position. If I get the underhook, I'm going to get him. So that's actually something I've been working the last few years and studying his game. But that's often someone I will watch and try to see if I pick up anything that he's doing to deal with the situations that I find difficult. But it's not just him. There might be other parts of my wrestling that might be influenced by someone else. That's the same approach I have with jiu-jitsu. If I'm working my underhook, I'll look at Yazdani. If I was working my 2-on-1, I might look at Saitiev or someone else. There's different wrestlers with different skill sets, and I'll do the same thing in jiu-jitsu. If I wanted to work my Toriando pass, I'd probably watch some Leandro Lowe. If I wanted my knee cut pass, I'd look at Lepri or Guy Mendez, and the list can go on. But yeah.
I mean, I think that obviously makes sense. And certainly as someone working with sports scientists on a regular basis, I would say performance analysis or using video would probably be like the first thing that I would introduce in a professional program, because it gives you the opportunity to see actually what you're doing. It gives you an opportunity to quantify what you're doing, and also you can reflect on it. And certainly one thing I noticed with you when we talked about before is you'd always say, oh yeah, I've looked at this guy, I've seen what this person's doing, and I've changed my game. But one of the things that specifically that actually struck me a lot was when we were in Thailand, I asked you about, De La Riva, because with my particular levels of capacity, I find De La Riva very difficult to do. And with the leg locks, I was like, well, how is De La Riva useful when you have leg locks involved? Better to play inside position, butterfly, etc. And I asked you, hey, what do you think of De La Riva? And you were like, oh yeah, I don't think it's necessarily that great a position. And then like 6 months later, you've completely changed. And now essentially you're basically playing De La Riva to enter the legs, right? So that must have come from studying video, and for actually the fact that you changed your mind was something that really struck me, and was something that actually I think is a very useful skill to have.
I think anytime I see someone, doing something repeatedly, like where it kind of seems like they have a system, like I think sometimes you see someone do a move once and you go, oh, that's a cool move. But if you see them hitting it repeatedly, at least for me, I try to then see, well, is that, would that fit somewhere in my game? And I think that was kind of, well, maybe it was similar sort of thing where you said, look to the end and work backwards. Once I kind of was stuck on the 50-50, once I was set that I wanted to work 50-50, I started to then look, how do we get to 50-50? And I said, who's the, at least in the IBJJF, who's constantly getting to these leg entanglements, the Meow brothers. And they're using this K-guard. When I watch them no-gi, they're still getting to the leg entanglements. It's a bit different to how they usually get it in the gi, and they're using K-guard, and it just happens to be 50-50. So when I saw that, and they're doing that repeatedly over and over again, so I started playing with that outside leg position. And then I think it was a purple belt, believe it or not, from Sydney, who trains with Levi a bit, actually. He came down and he was using something very similar to my De La Riva entry, but in the gi. I rolled him in the gi, and he was it was really annoying because he was doing that De La Riva and then going to K-guard. And I kept thinking I could like go under the legs to pass him. And every time I went to do that, he would like get to the leg entanglement. And I think I didn't get enough time to really, because he was just down to train for a day or two, I think, but I didn't get enough time to sit down and go like, hey, what were you doing? But it was enough for me to stop and try to break that down myself. And then I realized I had new avenues to attack from the De La Riva position itself. So I suppose just being aware of what other options are out there and how they could possibly link to what you have. But I would say one positive for I think we talk about having a specialized game, but I've probably worked a lot of different areas, which is a positive in that when I see something new, I can often find a way to place that and add that to my game.
But before the leg locks was released, before the leg lock TV was released, I think the one before you released before that was the body lock pass. So was the body lock pass, when you were doing that, was that DVD filmed because that was something you were working on again? And did that film, that DVD, help you to get better at doing the body lock as well?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I say, like, when I say I was working wrestling and leg locks, I didn't neglect the rest of, like, when I rolled, I didn't try to, ignore the fact that there were guard passes or back takes or anything like that. But I certainly would focus a large amount of time on leg locks and wrestling. And the body lock pass was something I had been working for a while. And then I had a match with Ross Nichols, and just from rolling with him, a few months prior, and the style of guard he plays, like a butterfly based style, I thought that would be he would be a good person that would be a good move to try to get past him. And actually somewhat again, influenced by the meows, because when I was in Ireland doing a seminar, Dara O'Connell was there. I can't remember. This might have been 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Dara O'Connell was there, and he's a black belt from Ireland, a good black belt from Ireland. And he'd just come back from training at Unity, and he's like, man, the Meow brothers were just body lock passing me over and over again in no-gi. And I was like, oh, really? Because I was like, I've been working it a bit, but now that you tell me that, because the Meow brothers are small and they're able to beat someone. Dara was like my size, and I was like, geez, okay, well, if they can do it on someone high level like Dara, then there must be more to it that I can explore. So that kind of maybe a while ago set off me to continue working. And you could see it was a bit of a trend. There were a few of the, Craig, probably a great example of someone else who would be body locking me a lot. So problem with Craig is sometimes he does things to me and I'm like, oh, he's long, so that's why it works. But but it's definitely not. He's very technical. So Craig's excellent with his body lock pass too.
And one of the elements of your DVDs is you always have that bit at the end where you show video footage of you rolling. And I guess it's from watching those rolling footage that you started to notice and improve your game as well, right? That's like the thing, because obviously analyzing someone else's video is different to watching your own video. And I think a lot of people in jiu-jitsu analyze other people's video, but one of the things that we do in performance sport is that we literally analyze our own footage all the time. And for me, the thing that came up that I first saw this in jiu-jitsu was when I first subscribed to MG in Action, like, I don't know, 10 years ago, whatever it is. And you could go in there and you could click and you could watch every single time Marcelo Garcia did like a butterfly sweep, for example, right? And you go in there and you see how many times he armbarred, and then butterfly sweep would be like 5,000 times, and armbar would be like 200 times. And you're like, wow, you can see this guy's game and the fact that he's hitting this butterfly sweep 5,000 times, and there's 5,000 clips of him doing it. That is, for me, that is exactly performance analysis. Is you're able to watch what you do and then see if there's ways in which you can improve, and also you can then quantify through that performance analysis where you're getting stronger at and what you're getting better at, and how those things improve. So I thought like that, I think that must be a key factor in your game, and actually something I'd probably suggest to you would be, hey, keep doing that. Maybe do more of that. Maybe that's somewhere that really gave you an advantage that you wasn't immediately obvious, because you weren't doing it for that reason. You're doing it, because you're developing a DVD. But
I mean, I saw the benefit of it as well. Yeah. I mean, at the moment I spent, the last 6 months on guard retention, and that's an instructional that's in development too. And yeah, I feel like that's improved out of sight compared to where it was. Which is, are we talking about guard retention soon? What's next, or is that not part of today's discussion? But that was something that obviously my two matches I lost in ADCC were, which was against Lachy and then against Gordon, came about because of actually kind of a similar. In both cases, it was a poor proactive framing, which allowed the underhook. Against Gordon, I went from like a lying down to trying to sit up, and he shot an underhook at that time where I should have been framing. And against Lachy, I was very eager to attach myself to his leg, so I reached for his leg instead of framing, and he got the underhook there as well. So I hope at least that part of my guard retention is fixed. Not to say that I necessarily have the skill set to block all of their passes, but certainly if I can at least take the one that was identifiable and at least tick that off, I hope I've done that.
Yeah, well, we all have habits that we develop, don't we? And if you don't notice what they are, then obviously other people can exploit them because they're probably watching footage of you. So the fact that you can see that in your training footage probably allows you to fix that quickly, but rather than waiting to a competition and suddenly realizing that's the issue. So is there going to be like a guard retention DVD next? Is that part of the escapes thing?
No, that'll be next. Yeah. So it's in development. It'll be quite good actually. I've learned a lot. I've been working with, it's going to be my first co-produced DVD. So I've got a guy, Ari Tabak, who's very good light featherweight, or featherweight sometimes as well. So he's a bit lighter, but his guard is so hard to pass and his retention is ridiculous. So I kind of sat down with him and said, what are you doing? And I'm going to try and learn that. And then, try and mix that obviously with what I'm doing as well. And we can both kind of put a product out and hopefully help him out too. So, yeah.
Oh, that sounds awesome. I'm kind of looking forward to that as well. That'd be pretty cool. So going back to the planning, right? So if I was to summarize kind of like what you did and put it all together, we had this ADCC preparation where we started off with these 8-week, the final thing before the competition was this 8-week competition preparation where you had your travel to your competition. Then you had your late camp where you're being careful about not getting injured. Going back from that, you then had the competition preparation part where you stopped trying to develop new things, but instead you focused on making everything that you were doing like fast and effective. And then going back Behind that was then the 8-week skill development phase, which in this case turned out to be around about 8 weeks, where the focus was wrestling and leg locks. And there you were using the video footage that you were developing for your DVD to tweak little things. I think also we talked about that you also like improving your flexibility during that time. So now what I really want to do is get into the detail of those two phases. We've gone from that big picture and we're working our way back. Now I want to talk really about the weekly layout and how you did that. So let's just start with the skill development part of that, because you said there was more volume, there was more training. Maybe you could talk us through like Monday to Sunday, what your regular week looked like during that skill development phase.
My ideal was 5 wrestling sessions a week, but I don't think I usually probably got 3 to 4, just from the way everything ends up actually happening. But that would be usually Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Sunday would be the wrestling days, and potentially one of those if someone couldn't make it or one of the coaches couldn't make it, I wouldn't be able to do it. But that was my normal or what my planned schedule, and then Tuesday and Thursday being the pro grappling session. Usually if I didn't do a wrestling, it would be substituted with any of those where you took away wrestling, then it would probably be substituted with a pro session, and probably one of the Mondays or Wednesdays there. The wrestling would usually be 1 hour. Mostly something which I'll say it's like flow wrestling, which is kind of, I'd say it's wrestling at about 60-70% and specific training within those areas, so I might start from a single leg and we go. I don't like training wrestling at 100% because I really feel like the chance of injury is just too high and it's exhausting as well. So try to, if there's more of a focus on like if someone's defending, like switching to another move, if they're defending it well, like don't just drive through it at 100%, but try to switch to the next move and practice transitions more than grinding through to finish something. So that would be a mix of situational training and then just free wrestling as well, and drills on anything that I needed to drill to. And then there would be the pro sessions, usually half an hour of drilling and then about 40 minutes of specific training on whatever. We let people work whatever position they want to start from. You go for 5 minutes, your partner goes for 5 minutes. So for me, that was obviously it'd be predominantly like leg lock focused because I was already getting the wrestling training outside of that. So I usually wouldn't start. If I'm going with a jiu-jitsu person, I usually wouldn't be doing a wrestling style specific training because they might not have the same level of takedown defense. Although they might offer some submission, things which I probably focused on a little more in the end phase. Just making sure my takedowns worked with submissions, and then we'd have rolling at the end. So usually about half an hour to 40 minutes of rolling, and then I would finish off with a little bit of stretching. So just working a few areas to try to improve my takedown defense and guard retention.
So essentially you had like pretty much 4 wrestling sessions, which were about an hour long. And then you had those 2 pro jiu-jitsu sessions were more 2 hours long. And I guess as well, looking at your schedule, you're probably teaching in the evening as well, right? So you're teaching 3 to 4 hours in the evening as well. And did you ever, in the evening when you were teaching, do you ever roll with your students then? Or was it, if you did, would you count that as training or not really?
During this, in the lead up to ADCC, that's the thing. It's a little bit selfish to focus the training just on me, but I kind of felt like it was important to, I feel like if I add extra rolling at night, then I'm going to get too sore and tired. So I'd mostly just be coaching and obviously observing people roll.
Sure. So if we then move and look at, that was the skill development phase. Let's look at how that changed for the next section, which was the ADCC camp. Before you're doing all those wrestling sessions and only 2 pro sessions, I assume you did more jiu-jitsu in this last 8 weeks.
I would still potentially, if there was one of the wrestling coaches was in, I would do a wrestling and as a substitute for a BJJ role. So one of our coaches does train a bit of jiu-jitsu or would come in to kind of work some of his wrestling with some of the other jiu-jitsu guys. So if I was going with him, I would work wrestling and otherwise I'd do jiu-jitsu. But yeah, that would be a half-hour warm-up for drilling. And then for me, it would be 3 lots of 8 or 10-minute rounds of of rolling. You know, this is roughly, sometimes we do mix that up a bit, but 3 lots of 8 or 10-minute rounds of rolling. And then at the end, we would do that kind of ADCC round. So we'd have kind of everyone sitting around, and 2 people, like one of the people who's competing in ADCC and someone who's not, or maybe 2 people who are competing in ADCC, those 2 in the middle, and replicating an ADCC competition. And we would do this twice a week, which was, you know, you're counting points, someone's scoring the points, everyone around is cheering and trying to, you know, support one or the other person, whoever it is. But it would be a short, because it takes a while to go through, you know, if there's 4 people and everyone's going through their rounds, that takes a while. So we did it 2 minutes, no points, 2 minutes points, 2 minutes overtime, regardless. Even if you submitted them, we'd make them do the overtime so that they had to practice the overtime strategy. But it's really about implementing your strategy against someone with pressure, as close to, obviously is not going to be the same as ADCC, but it's as close to that as we can replicate in the gym. Each person that was competing would just do one, and that was on I think the Tuesday and the Thursday we would do that ADCC round, and then on the Monday and Wednesday we wouldn't add that kind of high pressure one in and just do regular training. So it would still be the same format, but just without the added, you know, everyone's sitting around watching you roll. And then so that'd be Monday to Thursday, and then on Saturday or maybe Friday night, or we've got an open mat Saturday. If I felt like just kind of doing a light roll or moving around, I'd do that. If I felt really good, I would maybe do a harder session, but usually it was quite a light one.
So in the sessions you're saying you're doing a warm-up 30 minutes of drilling. What would your drilling actually look like? Would you be going through a number of different positions? Would you be drilling like leg locks or back and something like this? What would your drilling 30 minutes before the session look like? What does that specifically mean?
To be honest, usually whatever I felt was important or needed work, you know, or just needed reps. So it's often, I suppose, in the lead up to the tournament, like in that very sort of short phase, I'd be much more likely to just drill my main sequence and just kind of go through the motions and make sure every part of that was feeling tight. But I do think you know, you have to have a good training partner. If you're going to drill your main, I feel like doing your main move on someone who's just kind of relaxed and letting you do it, you're not going to develop. The feel comes from like some level of resistance, or I say resistance, but like your opponent kind of not just feeding you it, but making you kind of work for it a little bit. So I try to do that. It's the same in wrestling as well, trying to work my main entries to takedowns or finishes for takedowns from there. So yeah, and that's usually 5 minutes me, 5 minutes partner for half an hour.
So if we recap what we're looking at so far, in the off-camp skill development macrocycle, where Lachy was experimenting with and developing his wrestling and leg lock game, we discussed the key role that video analysis played in helping identify areas for improvement. In sports science, we call this performance analysis, and is used to focus both on your opponent and on your own performance. It is extensively used in technical and tactical sports, such as team sports. In soccer, at the end of the game or practice, each athlete gets a video of every play they were involved in, both offensively and defensively. This is then supplemented with other data, such as where other people were on the pitch, as well as GPS data and heart rate, to give the athlete a full profile of what is going on. We then went on to look at weekly cycles and how their structure and content changed as we switched from the skill development to competition preparation macrocycles. The key take-home message from this is that the daily content of each training session addressed the broader goals of the macrocycle. During the skill development macrocycle, Lachy was focused on improving his wrestling and leg locks through a higher volume of low-intensity work. During jiu-jitsu sessions, while he didn't ignore other areas if they arose, the focus was squarely on directing the action towards leg locks. And when he undertook specific training, he would typically start from a leg entanglement or related setup. In the competition preparation macrocycle, the volume decreased, the intensity went up, and the focus switched to preparing for the rules of ADCC. When sparring, he tried to be fresh and practice with the intensity expected during the competition. So hopefully you enjoyed this discussion, and we'll tune in next time when we'll look at how Lachy's planning compares to traditional schemes used in other sports. As always, let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you get notifications whenever Lachy releases new content. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.